Right, our next session, it's going to be a hot debate: blockchain analysis or financial surveillance. I got my friend Alex Gladstein joining us for this, and we've also got Tom Robinson, who Tom I don't actually know that well, but it should be an interesting session. Should be coming in right now. If you've got questions for this, load them up as early as possible, because I will add them in as well. I've got a bunch of questions myself. There's Alex. Hi, Alex.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent.
Right, Tom's joined us. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Peter. Hi, Alex. I'm good, thanks.
I didn't realize you were English, Tom.
I am, yeah. We're based in New York.
Ah, okay. Well, listen, this is a hot topic. My job as a moderator is to be impartial, but I've already recently done an interview with Chain Analysis where I clearly wasn't very impartial, but I will do my best job possible here because, but it's a very important topic. And I'm going to start with a question for both of you. I'm going to let Tom go first. Tom, I just want you to make the argument for blockchain analysis, and once you're done, I'm going to allow Alex to make essentially the moral argument against blockchain analysis, and then we'll dig into it. But I'll let you go first, Tom.
Sure, absolutely. So I want to see as many people as possible using Bitcoin, benefiting from its advantages. I think the big risk and barrier to that is regulators and governments deciding that the financial crime risk is too high and basically regulating it out of existence. Now, of course, Bitcoin is a decentralized system. You can't actually stop transactions from occurring. But what you can do is basically shut down the pools of liquidity that make it usable. So the exchanges, the on-ramps, the off-ramps, you can prevent them from operating. And so in order to prevent this from occurring, as an industry, we need to work within the rules. We need to demonstrate that there are things that we can do to prevent Bitcoin from being misused at a large scale by criminals. And one of the key enabling technologies for that is blockchain analytics. So I think blockchain analytics is key for the mainstream adoption and support of Bitcoin.
All right. Well, I think you're very brave to come up against Alex Gladstein of all people on this subject. I would not have I wouldn't have the guts to come up against him to try and argue the moral case for blockchain analysis. But Alex, off you go.
So, Tom, thanks for coming on. You said you opened with that you want to see as many people as possible using Bitcoin and benefiting from its advantages. But its advantages are pseudonymity and confiscation resistance, and its advantages are a parallel system that governments can't control. And I'm afraid that the tools you're building will be used by police states around the world. Obviously, dictatorships don't care about the economic freedoms of their people. That's half the world. That's billions of people living in 90 countries. But forget that for a second. Let's actually just talk about democracies like where you're from, the United Kingdom, or where I'm from in the United States. I mean, we've got mass protests in my country right now against the establishment, against an abuse of power by the authorities, against a physical abuse of power by the authorities. We've seen protests in the last decade against the excessive use of surveillance against people, warrantless surveillance that Snowden uncovered in his leaks and in his whistleblowing. You've got a global surveillance state that has been built since 9/11 around the world, and even in open democratic societies. So the problem is that the tools that you're building, regardless of your intentions, are going to be used by police states to persecute people. And it would be a better use of your time to help Bitcoin become stronger and more private and less trackable. So I think you should quit your job at your company and work for the good guys.
Okay, so you mentioned censorship resistance and preventing authorities from seizing crypto. How does blockchain analytics compromise that?
Well, when I buy Bitcoin on Square or Coinbase, that's my private decision with them, right? So they obviously know that when I give them money from my bank account, they internally on their balance sheet, on their ledger, they assign me, let's say, the 0.1 Bitcoin I bought with my fiat money, right? And then one day I decide to withdraw it, right? Which is the whole point of Bitcoin, is that you are self-sovereign, right? They know that the address that they sent that 0.1 Bitcoin to is associated with my name. So the law system would make a reasonable assumption that that's mine. When I move it from there if you know that that was mine. So if you are partial to that information, you can then start to track what I'm doing. If you weren't partial to that information, you can't. You have no idea you have no idea who that is. You don't know. There's no way you can just take a look at a random address on the Bitcoin blockchain and make a good assumption about who owns it. You have to have a pair. You have to be able to pair an address to an identity, through de-anonymizing somebody. And my argument to you is that, at the end of the day, what you're doing is like warrantless surveillance against citizens of different countries, where like they didn't give you permission to spy on what they're doing. And the governments arguably, at least in my country, we have the Bank Secrecy Act, I will admit, which I'm not a fan of, but, blockchain analysis, or what I like to call financial surveillance, opens the door for spying on people's transactions and behavior below that sort of $10,000 limit. It opens the door for a whole new ballgame in terms of how governments have real-time surveillance over microtransactions, which they shouldn't. If I'm going to make a decision to reveal my identity to a company, that should be our decision. We don't want you guys coming in and taking that information and giving it to other people. I don't think that's a legitimate business use case, and I certainly don't think it's helpful for Bitcoin.
So you've moved your Bitcoins off of Square into a wallet that you have the private keys for. You can now do whatever you want with those Bitcoins. Those transactions cannot be censored. Those funds cannot be seized, with or without blockchain analytics. Yes, your future actions could be linked back to your account at Square, but use a mixer, use some other kind of privacy preserving technology to break that link. That's still absolutely possible, even with blockchain analytics. On your second point, spying. So by transacting in Bitcoin—
Wait, are you saying that there's no reason for you guys to do what you're doing?
Are you advising people how to get around the tracking?
No, what I'm saying is that the original point Alex made was that blockchain analytics compromises the censorship resistance of Bitcoin. That's simply not the case. If you hold your private keys, you can do what you want with it, regardless of blockchain analytics.
But what is censorship resistance without privacy?
Well, Tom, just to react,
sure.
If the police come to my house and arrest me, then I can't spend my Bitcoin. Basically, what I'm saying is you're enabling the government to have a better understanding, a micro understanding of what I think should be private transactions that only people should have control over. I do agree with you that in the near future, this idea of blockchain analysis will basically be rendered useless by advanced privacy technology that's being implemented and rolled out right now. But right now, what you're doing is you really got to understand you're in the same way that companies that did warrantless surveillance in the service of the government to prevent terrorism, you're really acting at the behest of forces that will end up destroying civil liberties and human rights and freedom. And it's not about making Bitcoin safe for people. Bitcoin exists to literally create a totally different economy that's not controlled by the government. So I think what your company is doing is making it more dangerous for people, because right now you're taking advantage of a moment in Bitcoin's history where it is vulnerable, and you're exploiting that vulnerability to help governments and companies, identify people who, otherwise are pseudonymous. I mean, you're de-anonymizing them.
But you can still use a mixer, right? So there are still anonymizing technologies available in Bitcoin, which mean that whether using blockchain analytics or not, I cannot see where you're sending
but only some people use Signal. I know how to use Signal for my messages, which is great because it means the government can't see what I'm saying. That being said, what about the other 80%? Are you saying it's totally fine that the government is spying on them and that's fine? I mean, only a small percentage of Bitcoin users use mixers. What about everybody else?
I think that there's always going to be a trade-off between convenience and privacy, and for the vast majority of people, convenience trumps privacy.
Tom, can I ask you a question? Just sorry. Because you mentioned mixers and such there.
Yep.
Does your technology or does the innovation team within your company, are you looking at ways to de-anonymize coins that have been through a mixer?
No, we're not. And we believe in everybody's right to financial privacy. What you cannot expect, however, is to use a mixer and then take those Bitcoins and expect to be able to use it on a regulated exchange without any kind of questions being asked. It's a bit like taking a bag full of cash and taking it to your local bank. They're going to ask questions if you try and deposit those funds. I think that's a very reasonable thing for a regulated financial institution to do.
Right. So you're working at the behest of the legacy financial system to prevent people from using their Bitcoin if they choose to be private. And I just think that's immoral.
When you say the legacy financial system, you mean centralized crypto businesses?
Fiat money, bank credit. Like you just said, if I take some of my wealth, my hard-earned time and money, and I buy Bitcoin with my wages, and then I mix it, and then I want to spend it later, you're going to prevent, your technology prevents me from exercising my freedom there.
No.
Because you're going to prevent me from being able to upload that Bitcoin to an exchange where I can convert it to fiat money. Is literally what you just said.
Absolutely not. We do not prevent you from doing it. What we're saying is if you
But
do
you
that,
help the exchanges flag these users and prevent them from withdrawing their funds or from putting flagged coin joined, amounts into these accounts.
we're not preventing anything. We're just giving visibility to those regulated financial institutions.
Yeah, but without you, according to you, without you, they can't do it. They need you to help identify who's coin joining.
Can I
Sure,
just
yes.
make a point here, just to trying to be the impartial, fair person as best I can? Is what you're saying here, Tom, if you don't do it, somebody else will. The market will provide a service. Therefore, the problem isn't essentially yourselves. It's just the fact that the regulations exist.
Okay, so let's think about the scenario where blockchain analysis doesn't exist whatsoever. It would basically be like Bitcoin as a privacy coin. And what we've seen with privacy coins is that increasingly regulators and the banking partners of exchanges are putting huge pressure on those exchanges to delist privacy coins. We've seen that in the UK, we've seen that in Japan. And I think without blockchain analysis, we'll also see that with Bitcoin itself. And therefore, we'll just be back to Bitcoin being a niche tool used by a very small number of people rather than really capitalizing on an amazing innovation.
Okay. Should I respond to that, Peter?
You should definitely respond to that.
Yeah. So the thing with privacy coins is that they're very tiny. They're not used very much. They don't have a whole lot of economic momentum behind them.
Right.
The
Why
idea
is that?
Why is that? Because they have infinite supply, because they're corporate coins that companies can make and are much more centralized. Like, it's very different from Bitcoin, which already has a huge amount of legitimacy, and worth and value.
How's it getting
And
that
governments
legitimacy?
and companies aren't going to be able to just decide to. I mean, you can't run a cryptocurrency exchange and decide to delist Bitcoin. That's not going to work. So the whole point of what people are doing in Bitcoin is trying to make Bitcoin as private as possible, so that privacy and freedoms can't be stripped away by governments and companies that want to hire you guys to try and de-anonymize folks and hurt their ability to spend their money how they want to spend it. So it's like a race against time, and you should join our side. It's just a much better way to sleep at night.
So the key thing there was that you said that Bitcoin has legitimacy. Why does it have legitimacy?
Because it has value,
compliance
because it's
solutions-
digitally scarce. It's the first decentralized digital scarce asset in human history.
And there are
it will continue to rise in value.
And it's because it's used, right? There are huge pools of liquidity all around the world that help you to move in and out of it. The reason for those huge pools of liquidity is that compliance solutions have been found to make regulators comfortable with Bitcoin.
No. The reason why Bitcoin's valuable is not because of compliance and because of chain analysis. The reason Bitcoin's valuable is it's the first asset in history that allows humans to digitally transact without being censored or confiscated. And it's a way for people to have a safe store of value in a time of chaos and uncertainty. It has nothing to do with whether or not your company exists. I mean, Bitcoin doesn't care if your company exists or not.
Well, you misquoted me. I didn't say valuable. I said legitimate, which is what you said about Bitcoin. The reason that Bitcoin has got to the scale it has, the reason that we have these huge exchanges that allow millions of people to move in and out of crypto is because of the compliance policies that they've been able to put in place.
Is that really true?
That's my experience. So I started Elliptic 7 years ago. We actually started out trying to start a regulated financial service business. And we spoke to every regulator, we spoke to every bank, and they were scared to death of the financial crime risks. So within the compliance tools and policies that regulated crypto businesses have been able to put in place over the past few years that I think has enabled Bitcoin to get to where it is today.
I have two questions for you, Tom. So do you believe all Bitcoin transactions should be tracked?
No, I think that it should be very selective. If you're a crypto exchange, then I think you do have the right to screen your customers' transactions. I don't think there should be wide-scale cross-blockchain surveillance though. You
don't, but you think certain ones should be.
Yes.
Do you think stores accepting physical cash should keep a copy of the serial numbers of the notes they accept and a copy of your identity at the same time?
I think it depends on the scale of the transaction. If you're buying a $2 million apartment, yes, possibly. If you're buying a Mars bar, probably not.
So you think financial surveillance comes with the scale of spends?
Yes, because the risk also comes with the scale of the spending.
Interesting. Do you not think financial privacy is like a basis of democracy?
I think that financial privacy and law enforcement are bases of civilization, and that those two things need to be balanced.
Okay. And who sets the moral authority for what is criminal?
I mean, in democracies, it's the majority.
Alex?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to paint a picture of here is that just like in communications, I can pick up the phone and I can call you. That's supposed to be a private conversation between you and me. What governments have figured out is they can use technology to spy on that conversation. In response, citizens have invented encryption technologies to allow us to communicate with each other without government spying. That is eventually what will happen to you and your company. It won't be helpful because privacy technology will sufficiently advance and you won't be able to spy on our transactions anymore. But in this moment in time, it is very unhelpful for you to be playing the role of the extension of the NSA or whatever, insert name of police state here. And, just watching the news should help underline how important this is. I mean, people are getting screwed over all around the world, even in places like the United States, by the establishment. They don't need more spy tools. They should have to go get a warrant to spy on my financial transactions. They should not be able to call Elliptic and ask a bunch of questions and you guys make a bunch of heuristical assumptions about my activity and then, present that as a case to take me to court. That shouldn't happen. And it's really just unfortunate that y'all are enabling governments to have this power at this moment in time where people are vulnerable. I mean, it's very sad.
So I think there's a key misconception there. So we are not performing surveillance. We are not linking individuals to crypto transactions or wallets. We are not performing warrantless spying on individuals. So take the warrantless spying accusation for a start. So what we are doing is providing a view onto public blockchain data. There is no way through our software that you can link those transactions or wallets to individuals. Where you need, the point at which you need a warrant or a subpoena is where you're trying to link that to individuals. So if a law enforcement agent wants to look at a suspect's computer and get their wallet addresses, or wants to get the account records from an exchange to link an individual to transactions, that's where the legal checks and balances come in and where you need things like warrants, not to look at public blockchain data.
Yeah, so if the world was as you describe, you wouldn't have a business. No one would pay you any money for what you do. You provide a service. You flag public blockchain data. That is a de-anonymization. That is part of the de-anonymization process. It's step one. Without that first step, you can't de-anonymize me. If you don't flag me, you can't de-anonymize me. You can't say that you don't do financial surveillance. It's not appropriate. And in fact, you should. I would prefer you refer to yourself as a financial surveillance company than a blockchain analysis company. It's just a euphemism. It's just a euphemism.
No, absolutely not. So as I said, we do not link wallets or transactions to individuals. In order to do that, you need to have the information from the suspect's computer or from their exchange records. All we provide is an easy to use interface to the public blockchain.
Do you think you can consider yourself a Bitcoiner and work in the world of surveillance?
So I think it depends what you mean by a Bitcoiner. I think that everyone sees different things in Bitcoin. For me, it's about having, for the first time, an open platform for innovation and financial services. Like we've had it with the transfer of information with the internet, and now we have it for the transfer of value with Bitcoin. So what's important for me are things like openness. It's about permissionlessness, and it's about everyone having access to it. It's less about complete anonymity.
It's funny, your answer there, I am impartial here, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, but I just am. Your answer is almost identical to Jonathan Levin's when I asked him the same. And I sometimes feel like it's a suitable answer to post-rationalizing the fact that you're building software which is antithetical to the goals of what most people want to achieve with Bitcoin.
I mean, you're going to have to take my word for it, but the reason I started Elliptic is because I want more people to be using cryptocurrency. And I see this as overcoming one of the main barriers to mainstream adoption of crypto.
Is that really true? Like that sounds like I don't know. You woke up one day and you thought, I really want more people to use Bitcoin, so I'm going to come up with I'm going to work on a surveillance tool.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to have to take my word for it, but yes.
Yeah. Alex, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask Tom? And I'll see if anyone...
Yeah, I mean, it looks like there's some questions here, but look, in my work as a human rights advocate, we encounter a lot of people that sell tech, surveillance tech to governments. We haven't even gotten into the technical conversation of, does your tech even really work? And I think there's major questions about the assumptions you make. And I think a lot of the things you do are no better than witchcraft, to be honest. But let's just put the technical issues aside. There are companies that sell their services to dictatorships around the world. So we're not talking about the United States government or Barclays. We're talking about a bank or a government proxy in a dictatorship that kills protesters regularly, like in Bahrain or Saudi Arabia or Russia, or even what appears to be coming next in Hong Kong. Your industry, the financial surveillance industry, is getting closer and closer, as a key part of what these regimes do to control their people. They want to know what's going on. And you have the opportunity, you have the choice to not be part of that, to fight against that, and to help people secure their financial freedom. And I just hope you consider that.
Absolutely, we do. So, of course, there's been a long and tragic history of governments abusing their powers in the name of law enforcement. There are legal checks and balances that are meant to prevent that, but sometimes they're just ignored. And so I absolutely do think there is a moral responsibility on companies like ours to decide who we should and should not be providing these capabilities to. So we, for example, would never provide them to any kind of authoritarian government.
What about the US government?
I mean, there's always gray areas, right? We have to decide on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so I want to answer Jack's question. He says, if it wasn't Elliptic, it'd be somebody else. So even if Tom decided to change his mind today and move his company to something else and they stopped doing financial surveillance, this is I think this is a kind of a troubling question, because we deal with the same thing with PR. So there are PR companies that do PR for dictators all around the world. And yes, of course, if one PR company stopped, there'd probably be another PR company that came in and helped the dictators. But it doesn't make what they're doing any better. It doesn't excuse their behavior or activity. You shouldn't do it. And we're going to challenge you and push you until you stop. That's at least our point of view.
So, Alex, can I ask you a question? So
yes,
we're operating in an environment where blockchain analytics exists. Most crypto exchanges use it. What is the impact of that? Is this compromising people's ability to use it for the kinds of applications you want them to use it for?
I mean, I would say that spying on people's messages and communications absolutely inhibits people from what they want to do. It creates a climate of fear, and it prevents them from making certain decisions. And I would argue the same for financial privacy. If I can't buy Bitcoin and transact it the way I want to, because I'm afraid that a company like yours is going to help a corporation or a government de-anonymize me, then I'm going to make different decisions. Like if I live in Hong Kong and I want to use my Bitcoin, to withdraw Bitcoin into cash at a cash point to then go buy things so I can protest, I'm going to have to think long and hard about that if a company like yours is going to be helping a government identify me at that point of sale. So, I mean, you have to think about the chilling effect that financial surveillance creates.
But you don't think those types of people are savvy enough to use a mixer, for example, to overcome that kind of analysis?
And again, I hope they are, and we will, and they all will. But it doesn't excuse what your company is doing. I mean, it's not helpful.
So the reason we're doing this, though, is to prevent crypto being used for financial crime. There are plenty of very bad people using crypto to facilitate everything from drug trafficking to ransomware, sanctions evasion. You can't just put that to the side and say that's not important.
No, but we can address those things through legitimate police work as opposed to mass surveillance and warrantless flagging of pseudonymous addresses that could be problematic. I mean, you're literally engaged in digital profiling of people, and you claim you don't even know who they are. That's even worse. So you're just basically going to a company or government saying, hey, all these addresses you guys should look into. This is called mass surveillance, and I think it doesn't work, at least the civil liberties violations, and it's highly problematic. If a government has reason to believe that a particular suspect or a person has committed a crime, great. They should have to prove that in front of a court. That's how free countries are supposed to work. So you are helping them get to a point where they don't need courts, and that's really problematic.
So it sounds like your problem is more to do with anti-money laundering regulations in general rather than blockchain analytics and crypto specifically, because this is something that financial institutions... No, my problem is with your company specifically, not in general terms. But you're saying that there should be, traditional law enforcement investigations to identify crime, not monitoring by financial institutions.
I think it's both. Just conscious of time, because I think we've come to the end of our session, and this was brilliant, and we probably could have debated this for a long time, and perhaps we'll continue it somewhere else, or maybe Ryan Selkis will do one on the Mazzari podcast. I think it's brilliant. I think you both did an amazing job at defending yourself. I obviously side on the side of Alex. I'm against any form of surveillance, and but I appreciate you coming and defending your side, Tom. Alex, thank you very much.